prophet. The dictionary defines this as one who delivers divine messages or who foretells the future. Rage, a useful and necessary tool for revolution. Put these two together and you'll find a common theme for a group whose global message has proven them to be the prophets of rage.
You're quite hostile. I got a right to be hostile, man. My people been persecuted.
What's up? This is Elia Einhorn. Welcome to the Talkhouse Podcast. Today I'm joined by
Nick Dawson, Editor-in-Chief of Talkhouse Film.
Listeners, I am absolutely thrilled to be able to tell you that our guests on today's episode are the one, the only, Chuck D of Public Enemy.
And Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine.
You just heard a clip of Public Enemy's song Prophets of Rage. That's also the name of the new band that Chuck D and Tom Morello have with Rage Against the Machine's Tim Comerford and Brad Wilk, along with Public Enemy's DJ Lord, and of course, the one and only Cypress Hill's Be Real.
These guys have just released their first record, and it's very cool that two of these giants of, basically protest music have come together, particularly at a time like this when it's so important that in politics, in culture, and in music, in film, that people really speak truth to power.
Right, Nick. Public Enemy, Rage Against the Machine, these are two bands that changed the game. It's amazing that coming with such politicized messages, they sold double-digit millions of records. Now, Public Enemy, of course, throughout the 80s and 90s released albums full of hard-hitting social commentary and political discourse. Their backup dancers were the security of the first world who carried fake Uzis. The band wrote Fight the Power for Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. And of course, 911 as a joke was a huge wake-up call for America.
And of course, with Rage, like when I was first really becoming aware of music in the 90s, they were one of the really huge bands. Not only like an incredible sort of hard rock band, but the subjects that they were talking about in their music, in a really uncompromising way, I think really shifted the way that a lot of young people were thinking. Let's listen to a clip from Killing in the Name of.
And I can do what they told you. Now you're under control. And I can do what they told you. Now you're under control. And I can do what they told you. Now you're under control. And I can do what they told you. Those who died are justified. But wearing the bad, they get chosen white. You're justified. Those that died, but wearing the bad, they get chosen white. Those who died are justified.
Still hits hard decades later. Rage Against the Machine's rhythm section, Tom Morello, Tim Comerford, and Brad Wilk also went on to form Audioslave,
which was, of course, led by Chris Cornell. That
R.I.P.
Yeah, such a sad loss earlier this year.
Audioslave were not a political band, so at the same time, Tom Morello started performing and releasing his own solo music as the Night Watchman.
And I believe that you and he actually shared a stage together a couple of years back.
We did. I was not heavily involved with Occupy Wall Street, but I supported a lot of what they did, and Tom and I played a big rally at Union Square playing Woody Guthrie songs.
That's very, very cool. And it sort of ties back to what we're talking about. The legacy of Woody Guthrie and of protest music generally continues through Public Enemy, through Rage, and now through Prophets of Rage.
Right, and the guys talk about that here in the talk, about protest music from the 40s and 50s onward. They also get into why new groups are afraid to be overtly political.
Absolutely. I think there's a fear now just of losing your base, of saying something that's going to alienate people.
Yep.
And Rage were always this band who really were ultra principled in the way they approach things. And a great example of that is the way they handle the situation around the video that they made for Freedom and wrangling with MTV around the, Viacom censorship. That's a really, really great story and a really entertaining, funny one that Tom tells in the talk.
The guys also talk about the democratization of music via technology, the many pros and occasional cons.
Right. And Chuck D is somebody who I feel like has always been at the forefront of that conversation around digital music, around piracy, and he's always like just this super enlightened perspective.
Well, and Nick, these guys are still as pissed as they ever were. Check out some of the song titles from this Prophets of Rage record. The Counter-Offensive, Strength in Numbers, Hands Up. And here, check this one out. This is Radical Eyes.
Didn't hear my cry, said fuck my crisis. Didn't hear my cry, said fuck my crisis. They say I'm radicalized. See, I'm radicalized. They say we're radicalized. See, I'm radicalized. They say I'm radicalized. See, I'm radicalized. They say we're radicalized. See, I'm radicalized. They say we're saying with this. They say we're saying with that. They say we're saying with this. They say we're saying with that. They say we're saying with this.
And now, in conversation for the Talkhouse Podcast,
Tom Morello
and Chuck D.
Let's get inside off your head. Why don't you take these meds? What I'm conveying, my decay, and more blood gets shed. You can witness on a
I'm Tom Morello. I'm here with Chuck D. We are members of a band called Prophets of Rage, and we have come to you today to talk about music and politics and our history dealing with music and politics, stuff like that.
A lot of people are afraid of that, Tom.
They are, and they should be, if it's done right.
Oh, well, even musicians are afraid to step into that. Well, it has to be done right.
Exactly, yeah. They're afraid to do it right. All right, so Chuck, why don't we start with you? What was the first, protest music that got your attention?
Well, I was in first grade. I had to recognize Peter, Paul, and Mary. As we were singing Puff the Magic Dragon, didn't know what it meant, but we also knew that they would do other songs too, and I heard about that. My mother played a lot of music from Mary McKeeba, Harry Belafonte, Motown Stax Atlantic household. So music was that extra voice in the house during the turbulent 60s, where you had the assassination of a president, you had a war in Vietnam, Southeast Asia that no one could understand. You had a situation where your so-called person that you looked up to and heard as the person to represent your race, which on my birth certificate it was Negro, and then we were colored, and there was a Civil Rights Act when I was 5. And then by the end of that decade, black was beautiful all of a sudden. But before we got there, the person we kind of listened to and looked up to, he was assassinated. And the president's, brother, who also was in the government, running for the president, he was assassinated. So after a bunch of these assassinations, and even Malcolm X, who my uncle just followed and brought into the household, he was assassinated. So with war and all these assassinations, and the music speaking out of what was going on, you would have to be, and I'm not saying this in a derogatory way, you have to be deaf, dumb, and blind not to know, what was going on. And you would have, by having music in the house, it informed you beyond the news stations. So it was their minute one, because it's what my parents listened to. They listened to the musicians. My mom played a lot of records. A lot of records were in the house, but not just playing them, but talking about them, and then going to school and finding out that music was in the first school systems that I, went to. And like I said, the Peter, Paul, and Mary, we had to sing their songs all the time, and Woody Guthrie songs all the time as first and second graders. So that was ingrained in me. By the time 1970 came, it was already in me. And for some reason, they didn't kill presidents anymore in the United States, or, black leaders who were up front, and the war was over, and people went on to these other different tangents. But it is already embedded in me that music spoke to us first.
My experience was I had a political household, but not a musically political household. So, my mom was a civil rights activist, and my father, who did not live in the home, was involved in Kenya's independence struggle against the British colonialism. But the music in our household was like the Temptations, and it was stuff like that, and some symphony music. And then I discovered hard rock and heavy metal on my own, which was very non-political, but I loved the visceral aggression of it. And so it wasn't until my sophomore, junior year of high school where I was introduced to a band called The Clash. Someone brought in the London Calling record to school, and I saw the cover of it where the guy's smashing the bass on the cover. I thought, this must be an excellent heavy metal album, because look, there's violence on the cover. And when I first listened to it, I was very surprised that it was not as, riff-tastic as AC/DC or Sabbath. But I was very also surprised that the lyrical content resonated with me in a way that none of the metal albums had.
So explaining it to your mom was quite a revolutionary herself.
Yeah. I mean, my mom was, I'm used to my poor mom, long-suffering mom. She was made to you have to learn the name of the guys in Kiss, because I don't have any siblings, so you have to learn them too. The poor lady, I think that one's Paul. No, Mom, that's Peter. But then I discovered, that opened sort of the door to punk rock and music that lyrically I could relate to, and also felt like it was a window into a world, like an honest presentation of world events, which I did not feel I was getting in my high school. I did not feel I was getting on news broadcasts, but Joe Strummer and then Chuck D were an information source combined with a beautiful and rocking soundtrack that's made me think, there is a world of ideas beyond those that are presented in the small suburb where I grew up.
Wow. Yeah, I always liked looking at the World Book year, the year end in the World Book. I always, in a weird way, would go to the obituary section first. Because if they're covering this person since he died, he must have did some, incredible stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
must have done something.
It would be the first, and then I would go to baseball, but the World Book was important. Every year had this explanation of what went on before. And that actually helped me, kind of chronicleize songs later on in the same similar way.
But if we're talking about sort of the history of American protest music, I think, and how it's changed, I think there's one element that has never changed. And that is that people in whatever their vocation are, whether they're musicians or journalists or carpenters, that have a conscience, that feel that there is injustice in the world, some percentage of them are going to fight back. Right. Some of them are going to act up in their line of work, whether it's through the Carpenters Union, whether it's through some student demonstrations, or whether it's at concerts and in studios. And so I believe those are all kind of in the world of music, those are all links, sort of in folk music, they talk about there's links in the chain. So from the prison chain gangs of Louisiana, through the music of Woody Guthrie, into the Pete Seegers, Phil Oaks, Bob Dylan's, and then into the punk rock era, the Sex Pistols and the Clash, then Public Enemy, then you've got the System of a Downs and the Rage Against the Machines, and the countless artists who do not chart but are making music that's impactful at thousands of demonstrations around the world over the course of decades. That's one thing that doesn't change. One thing that has changed, certainly, in our lifetime, the first Rage record came out, I think, 26 years ago, is kind of the digital realm and the world of social media. In my view, it's provided a democratizing aspect to music. It used to be you had to get a record deal in order to have a song that was going to be heard by people, or you would do it would be a DIY thing where you'd sell 45s out the back of the truck, and there was a ceiling to that was known. Now you, me, and the person walking by right now can have a Facebook page like Metallica does. We can make a record with all of the digital competence that the Beatles made the White Album with on our phone, right? And we can make a movie or a video, with stuff that we've got in this room that can be as sort of visually and sonically present as anything that's been made before. So that, I think, throws the doors wide to the democratization of making music, of making protest music. It also dilutes the audience for such things, because the downside of sort of the major labels was that they had a very small funnel that was decided by people often unqualified to do so, who the world was going to hear. Now the world gets to hear everything. But occasionally what came through that funnel was U2, Public Enemy, Rage Against the Machine, that made everyone from Pittsburgh to the Philippines know about your band, be able to decide what they thought about the content of it. Now we're kind of lost in this shrapnel of a million bands, a million groups, a million artists, a million ideas. Hopefully you find one that you like. So we've been fortunate in our band, Prophets of Rage, that we still are drafting on kind of the histories of our bands in order to have an audience. And Chuck and I have played in front of 2.5 million people in the year that we've been a band together, with a message that is undiluted from when we made our first record.
Well, I ask you a simple question. I think I explained a little bit that when I was in the school systems in New York, in the 60s, we did hear about, the poets, and we did learn something about Joe Hill and Woody Guthrie. And we did, look at music programs that would start you off with the elementary beginnings of what an instrument did and how to play it.
Yeah, that's not there.
When did you feel that sort of was did the government kind of like have something to do or it was a state curriculum, or counties are explaining that, look, we ain't got no money.
Yeah.
And the first thing
It's
is
just
going to
a matter
go
of-
is just this arts.
Exactly. That's just a matter of priorities. I mean, they're not cutting back on aircraft carriers. They're cutting back on, guitars and bongos for preschoolers. I think there's a
Hell, that school ain't cutting back on the basketball team either.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's clearly just a matter of societal priorities, which I think is dramatically askew. But the good news is that now, like, nobody wants to be a guitar player anymore. Everybody wants to be a DJ, and you can be a DJ on your phone. You know what I mean? Now, you have to have a conscience and an awareness that there is injustice in the world and a fire in your belly to do something about it, but you can act. And one thing that we're seeing, I don't know when this program's going to come out, but in the last week or so, globally, people standing up against the rise of racism and the rise of immigrant bashing and the rise of fascism. And that is something that is certainly fueled by by digital media. And one thing that travels on that digital media is music. And music, I think, it's certainly in the United States, there's never been a successful social movement that has not had a great soundtrack.
Right.
And in 2017, there is a domestic and global resistance that requires some artists, one artist, 15 art, whatever. I know Prophets of Rage, we've already volunteered for the job. We're going to hold the space till somebody else shows up. But
so is there fear there? Is there fear by artists? And where does this fear come from? Like, let's say if they have no label or no management, why is it this?
Well, I can explain that. I mean, anytime I post anything on whether it's a tweet or whether it's an Instagram that tangentially talks about Trump or neo-Nazis, people will vehemently, like people will not be your fan. I mean, I know on our current record, there are some stations in the red states that will not play a Prophets of Rage song because of the lyrical content. And so you have to be someone that just goes, I don't fucking care. This is what I believe in.
Right.
I'm going to do that. But in an age where it's a near impossibility to make a living as a musician, people do that calculation. Like, do I want to alienate 40 to 55% of a potential audience by taking a political stand and maybe not have a career career in quotes in the music industry? Or do I say what I believe and let the chips fall where they may? We've always let the chips fall where they may, but I understand that kind of societal pressure to water it down.
Well, there has to be people like us that be able to encourage a person that loves music and wants to make music, that they can make some sort of living off of making music.
Yeah.
Maybe not, everybody's not going to ride around in PJs and limos and stuff like that, but the society has to be able to uphold someone who wants to be able to be a musician. A musician is necessary. I think it's necessary for a person to learn how to play a guitar. Chords are real. Chords hit the vibration of life and how they receive chords for things that go beyond us having tangible explanations. It's like, wow, I feel good because the way that this person played, even if it's a harp or whatever. So I just think that this support of encouraging musicians that they could be okay when they get a sense of themselves can also make them fearless in saying things that people need. And it will come around, I don't know if that's utopian, but somebody has to say something, because at the end of the day, having corporations having the major say on whether a person's going to be a musician or not, that can't happen.
Yeah. Well, the good news is people are going to be musicians. But the access to the music and one of the programs that Prophets of Rage has been involved in is Jail Guitar Doors, which is in the UK run by Billy Bragg. Domestically, it's run by Wayne Kramer and his wife Margaret. And what they do, in what we've helped provide them to do in small measure, is provide instruments, guitars for inmates in prisons across the United States. And it has dramatically impacted the recidivism rate as a way to, mentally rehab from the things that have gone on in your life, and a way to express yourself that may not be via crime or violence. And it's been a tangible societal benefit to guitars and to music that is undervalued by the society at large. It takes like a couple of nonprofit organizations to do it. What we do, in our line of work, the message is in the mosh pit. And first and foremost, as a band, being one of the few explicitly political bands, that are granted interviews on fine podcasts like yourself, much of our talk is about the politics of it. But first and foremost, you had better be a great fucking band or you're not going to get anybody's attention. Public Enemy was, Chuck D did 100 interviews and 99 of those interviews were about the politics of Public Enemy. I, as a member of Rage Against the Machine and Prophets of Rage and the Night Watchman, I've done 10,000 interviews and most of them are about politics. But no one's going to interview me, no one's going to interview him unless we've made records that are rocking fools senseless, unless we've played shows that demonstrate clearly beyond any shadow of a doubt that the message is first and foremost in the mosh pit.
Yeah, and I'd also add to that the saying that the fact that we're in a multimedia, millennial generation of access to all these sights, sounds, stories, and styles, the visuals are very important. The sight and sound of a video and the accessibility to be able to create something which doesn't, exceed your recording budget. Because in the past, you did something and people would say, well, yeah, this video would actually cost you this to convey this message. And you were kind of like kowtowed into it. And you're like, well, you're saying the only way we could get this thing across is that the budget that we got for this is 8 times the size of the budget we got to record this album for this one clip. And then you're going to tell us to change it back because MTV told us to blur something out? Well, what kind of game is this?
That was so crazy.
I'm so happy that
Tell me something that got edited for listeners who might be younger, might not remember this game. There was a thing called MTV once back in the day, and what it did was it broke bands. And if MTV played your video a lot, you would go from being a band that sold no records to potentially being a band that sold 3 million records during the summer. So it was not an unimportant thing in a musician's career. However, there was an evil hooded advisory board at the company Viacom that no one ever knew their name.
5 people.
But so that what they would do was they would look at your video and then you would wait to get notes back from Viacom, who was going to make bizarre judgments on yours. So what was your most kind of bizarre judgment?
Blurring a logo.
Blurring a logo
On a hat.
Oh, a hat. Oh, really?
It could have been anything. Like I had something on my...
Yeah. Because they thought they're going to have to pay the
And then later on, the game was like, oh, you know what? You delivered it, but you got to have closed caption.
Yeah.
And how much is closed caption going to cost? Oh, maybe like an extra $37,000. It's like, this is the game, man.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so the point. You say your point. What was the worst that happened?
Well, we had a number of things, and we would make these videos, and they would just like the most ridiculous stuff that it wasn't even like it was like one was a horse falling over, and one was something that might have been viewed as a gun, and one I had like the name of like my town on the back of a jacket, and that might have caused offense to a rival town. But here's how we circumvented them. This was the very first Rage Against the Machine video. Now, Rage was a band that was very popular in Europe before we were popular in the United States, principally because there were different censorship standards, and we could have songs on the radio and songs on MTV that they could not have here because we refused to edit the lyrical content. We were all very high-minded about that at the time. So finally, the record company here is losing their mind because they're being outsold by Belgium, and they're just everyone's about to lose their jobs in the fourth quarter if they can't sell some Rage records. So the record company suggests to the band, who's very difficult, we would like to give you a budget to make a video for the song Freedom on your record. And they pointed out in Freedom, there's no chorus to the song. It's 6.5 minutes long, and we suggestion came from the record company, that the video be about Leonard Peltier and we all work to get him out of jail together. Like, they were daring, like, say no to that. Try to say, so we're like, yes, we'll do that video. So we do the video, we spend the money on it. It's all about Leonard. It's a great, go to YouTube, run right now. It's a great video. But the final cut comes in and we're about to send it to Viacom. I'm sitting in the back of the tour bus with Michael Goldstone, our A&R guy, and we watch the video. I'm like, oh no. He's like, what? I'm like, oh no. He's like, what do you mean, oh no? Like, there's a bad word in it. And it's like, there's no bad word. We check the lyrics. I'm like, no, it's not in the lyrics.
It's in the visual.
It's an ad lib where Zach says, bring that shit in. And no one heard it and no one listened to it. And it's like locked into the MTV hot spot as all Viacom has to do is say, okay. I'm like, well, that's a problem, dude. But I've got a solution. This is what you're going to do. You're going to tell Viacom that he's not saying bring that shit in. You're going to tell him that shatin is the Aztec word for freedom. And he's saying, bring that shatin, bring the freedom, bring the freedom. And Michael's like, is that true? I was like, of course it's not true. Just going to tell him that. We're going to get it on the friggin' TV. And we did, and we became a hugely popular band.
Wow. That's big. That's big.
It all worked out.
That's, because you're married. As a musician, you're married to your art. You give birth to it. They're part of you.
Sure.
When you have a job, it's easy for you to kind of distance yourself from it or engage with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the artist has to have a stance that says, look, we believe in this. And when that team around it, when they believe in it, and I think with a lot of instances like that over the years, artists have been kind of like gun shy, no pun intended, to saying, well, I don't want to come out and say this because I don't know if it's going to be the end of my career. And this is permeated all the way down to the YouTube artists that might want to get signed. To sign to what?
Sure.
It beats the hell out of me.
Yeah,
and I tell them, sign to what? There's nothing out there to get signed to. Mm-hmm. Be you and deliver your messages. And I just think that now, since the freedom of somebody being able to cut and edit and shoot on their phone and also match something that they might say audibly is a good opportunity for other people to be fearless in saying what needs to be said.
Yeah.
I don't think there's an industry that's going to want to be able to know that they have the super job of taking 1,000 artists saying incredible things because they want their job to be easier. And they take weekends off and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't take weekends off. This is like 24 hours, 7 days a week. This is the point of view. This is the song. And then wherever I go, it's like a badge on my face, like a tattoo. So this is what, Prophets of Rage, when we decide to do a song, we wear the song. We have to wear it. And we're going to go around with the visuals that come out and everything else that comes, the stories that come along with these points of view. And we can't duck and dodge it. It's going to be stuck to us for life.
No hatred, fuck races, blank faces, times changing, one nation, unification, the vibration, unfuck the world. No hatred, fuck races, blank faces, times changing, one nation, unification, the vibration, unfuck the world. Papa D hit home like a bull.
Things have changed through the years for us as radical musicians. Now, when I heard that Clash record long ago, I immediately went to my guitar and I wrote a song called Salvador Death Squad Blues. That was sort of my introductory, political jam. And it speaks to the point of like the lesson of all of you artists and aspiring artists and musicians out there, there's a lesson of example. And for me, the Clash was an example that they were people that it really felt like, while they made great music, it felt like it wasn't career first. Right. It felt like they authentically meant everything that they were saying and let the chips fall where they may. And encouraged me in my high school to take a principal stand, in my small high school in Illinois, in my small band, to make a principal stand. And then, and that is just sort of echoed through the decades of my life. And I run into people every day that have seen some work of mine that may encourage them to some social justice fervor. And so whether you're, in line at the KFC and you hear someone make a racist comment, you stand up against it. Right. Whether you're in a band and you've got some convictions about the rally, the violence in Charlottesville, write a song about it. And not only is it sort of a cathartic experience, but people will witness your courage, and the echoes of that courage can resonate in ways you have no idea what's going to happen.
Right. That's why people initially or inherently they wasn't distant from authority, because they said, look, if I'm in a neighborhood, I want to feel like I'm protected. It wasn't until that was breached by years of incidents that just like, come on now. And so, I think people want to have people that stand up, or situations that stand up for them where they might not have the voice, or they might not ever have the voice. I think a lot of people naturally are shy.
Sure.
And today they have an answer for a person that's shy, that you can actually live through your avatar, social media, and not have to deal with the actuality of breaking the ice by being shy. And I think, these gadgets kind of cover that up. But musicians can kind of also help out by helping somebody break the ice.
Yeah, it certainly can, because it's it's a bit of a mole. It's certainly with the music of Rage Against the Machine and also with Prophets of Rage. First and foremost, you try to be a great rock and roll band. You got to be a great rock and roll band. You got to kick people's ass.
You got to learn how to play guitars.
Well, everybody's on the ones and twos right now. But in whatever your instrument is,
let me tell you, them ones and twos got guitars on them records.
Well, be great at it, because otherwise you're not going to get anybody's attention to begin with. And for me, it's I had the twin passions of being a musician, and so I did my 10,000 hours on that. But I felt like I didn't really choose that. That kind of chose me, and so I'm stuck being a guitar player. How then do I weave my ideas and my convictions into what I do? And that's where The Clash and Public Enemy provided a route. I can still like Kiss and I can still like Black Sabbath. Maybe some of those riffs, what if I bent those into my thoughts about Central American death squads? That's, and then Rage Against the Machine was the result of that.
Yeah, a lot of those sounds are bent into making those recordings, off recordings.
Yeah, right. Another thing too about music, one thing that is I think not often commented upon, is the political nature of music. Yeah. Leaving lyrics outside of it. And I always thought that the case, you can, for example, I believe that the saxophone playing of John Coltrane or of Charlie Parker is revolutionary. Here's why. One is because it challenged the conventions and the norms of the genre. And anytime you outflank the conventions of a time or of a thing, it begs the question, could we challenge the conventions of other things?
Right.
If we can do it in saxophone, could we do it in race relations?
Right.
If we can do it with electric guitar, can we do it with poverty? The things that have always existed in this way need not only exist in this way. And that's what I think the revolutionary musical production of Public Enemy suggested. Perhaps some of the music of Rage Against the Machine, sort of the combining of multi-ethnic band with multi-genre music
you gotta
suggested.
Have an understanding of the basics in order to attack the basics. You just can't come in there I don't agree with anything. I'm coming to just destroy it. You have to have some reverence for the basics to go in and say, well, this is wrong what I feel about the basics. But I do get that the basics need to be understood. Right.
I think Elvis's hips were political. You know what I mean? Like those hip thrusts challenged the world.
And the technology that refused to go lower than the belt.
Exactly. Yeah. You felt the culture of struggle in that. Woody Guthrie's guitar, I think, is very timely. This machine kills fascists.
Right.
The idea that a 6-string instrument was a weapon for defeating Nazism is an idea we perhaps should bring back.
Are you the only guy that actually still has writing on his guitar while he plays?
I don't know. I don't really check Google Images, but we could check. I'm sure somebody else is. For me, I always thought the guitar was a wasted space, if not a signboard. People I love my beautiful Les Paul guitar. I love the orange burst on. I'm what if you just scrawl something angry on there?
That's the Tom Morello signature. It's he's, people await to see, what he might say on the face of his guitar, what he might scratch in. He's giving hand third base signal signs. It's the third base coach is does he take the pitch or what?
I'm just curious about where we're
third base coach sign.
Where we're at. The world is not going to change itself. That, my friends, is up to you.
And we can definitely look for another guitarist that puts messages on their guitar. Number 2.
Yes, please submit your guitars with your scrawled situationist slogans on them. Thank you very much for having us.
Peace.
Chuck, Tom, thank you very much for being with us. Listeners, catch Prophets of Rage touring across America through the rest of the year.
Of course, this has been the latest in an ongoing series of political conversations we've had on the Talkhouse Podcast. Most recently, we had Seth Meyers in conversation with Senator Al Franken.
We also had Talib Kweli talking with Patterson Hood of Drive-By Truckers.
For these and all other Talkhouse Podcast episodes, go to iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever it is that you find your podcast.
Wherever fine podcasts are served. While you're there, rate and review. Every time you do, it helps someone else find the podcast.
Absolutely. Of course, also go check us out on Twitter,
Facebook,
Instagram,
and YouTube, where we now have full video episodes recorded at the flagship Sonos store, including the likes of David Cross with Jean Grey and the Strokes' Fab Moretti,
Kyle Mooney talking with Taran Killam,
and in our new collaboration with Food Republic, ASAP Ferg and Chef Andrew Carmelini.
Absolutely. Of course, don't forget that Talkhouse.com is the best place to go read daily pieces by musicians and filmmakers writing about the art that they make, the art that inspires them, their creative world.
Behind the boards, we have our mixing engineer and co-producer, Mark Yoshizumi.
And this episode was recorded by Susan Valot. Until next time, I'm Nick Dawson.
I'm Elia Einhorn.
We'll see you then.